So here we're back again, and it's part two of our chapter three digestion discussion. And we'll get into the nitty gritty of how things work through the digestive tract. So, as I think I already mentioned in the previous part, you have two parts to digestion, and it's basically a physical process and a chemical process. So, the physical process is allowing movement of the food through the body from the mouth through the anus, out the other end. And the chemical process is where the enzymes and other digestive juices help to break down the food. So if you know anything about enzymes, they speed up reactions and help to break down foods into smaller absorbable components. Most enzymes end in the letters A, S, E, or A's. So some common ones would be amylase, lipase, tryptase, and they are excreted in various parts of the GI tract. Like the stomach, small intestine, and pancreas are common places where those enzymes are excreted. So the digestive process begins in the mouth with chewing, of course. So that's the easiest way to break down food into small pieces. And then, as you know, you have salivary glands called the submandibular, parotid, and sublingual glands. And this picture on the slide kind of shows the location of those. Sometimes those glands can get a little bit clogged. You may experience occasionally where you have maybe a lump underneath your chin or on the side of your mouth where saliva has maybe clogged the salivary gland. That does happen in some people, but normally they work just fine. And amazingly, humans create about 1 to 1.5 liters of saliva per day. So just think about the volume of that. You think of a 2 liter bottle of soda maybe on the shelf and think about maybe three quarters of that full of saliva. So that saliva really helps to start the breakdown of food. And in that, you might find the enzyme amylase. So amylase is used to start the breakdown of sugars. So the saliva softens, lubricates, and dissolves the food particles. The amylase is the enzyme that helps enhance the breakdown of the sugars in those foods. You can try an experiment yourself where you might take a saltine cracker and put it in your mouth. Just hold it in your mouth, and at first you might notice it tastes salty, but then as those sugars are broken down, you'll notice that it has a sweeter taste. So give that a try if you have any saltines around. Another enzyme that you might encounter in this process here in the mouth is lingual lipase, and this helps with the digestion of fats. So these enzymes come from various glands, but there's also a gland called the exocrine gland that secretes chemicals into different parts of your body, like the salivary glands or exocrine glands, the mouth, and the liver would secrete bile into the gallbladder. So those are a couple examples of exocrine glands as well as your sweat glands, mammary glands, lacrimal glands, those are your tear ducts, sebaceous glands, and those are in the skin, and then mucus glands. So I'm going to show you a little video here, another one that explains the role of enzymes really well. So here you go.
The functioning, growth, and change in our bodies in part results from a multitude of chemical reactions and processes that occur in our cells each day. But what causes these reactions and changes? The answer is enzymes. They are complex proteins that facilitate change in other substances. They are known as the catalysts in a reaction because they are not consumed by the reactions they cause, nor do they alter the equilibrium of these reactions. Almost all processes in the cell need enzymes in order to occur at significant rates. Enzymes are very specific. Each one catalyzes a specific reaction. For example, salivary amylase catalyzes the breakdown of starch in the mouth. It is the shape of the active site of the enzyme that determines its activity. As this animation illustrates, if the compound does not fit the active site of the enzyme, no reaction will take place. But once there is a match between the enzyme and the molecule, the reaction is encouraged to occur. Enzymes require activation before catalyzing their specific reactions. Coenzymes, often vitamins, bind to enzymes to activate them. This allows the chemical reactions that depend on these enzymes to occur. The coenzyme is changed as a result of the enzyme action, and so, with no coenzyme now available, the enzyme becomes inactive, ready to be reused when necessary. Enzymes not only catalyze the breakdown of compounds, they also catalyze the formation of more complex compounds, such as forming glycogen from glucose molecules. When excess glucose is stored in the liver or muscle, each molecule is added to glycogen by the enzyme glycogen synthetase. When glycogen is broken down to provide glucose to the body, glycogen phosphorylase is used. Without enzymes working as catalysts, most reactions in the body would not occur.
So there you go, and here is the next part that we'll be talking about, and that's the esophagus. So from the mouth, the food is swallowed, and the food mass called the bolus moves into the pharynx to head down into the esophagus. Now the movements to move the food bolus down through the esophagus and down into the stomach is called peristalsis, and this occurs throughout your GI tract, through your stomach, out into your small intestine, large intestine. Now at this point, the epiglottis protects the trachea from food entering it. If that epiglottis is open, food can move from the esophagus into the trachea and cause choking. So that's one thing we don't want happening, of course. The peristaltic movement is pretty strong and just helps with the food transfer down into the stomach for the next phase of digestion. And the lower esophageal sphincter, which is at the bottom of the esophagus, relaxes and allows food into the stomach. So this is a problem for some people if that sphincter is not working well. You'll hear about people with reflux, or acid reflux is commonly called, heartburn, or GERD, which is short for gastroesophageal reflux disease. And that's when hydrochloric acid will backflow up into the esophagus, causing burning. People with this problem will commonly be prescribed something like Prilosec, Zantac, Tagamet to reduce the stomach acid and cause and help to prevent the symptoms of GERD. So now we head to the stomach, and once the food is allowed into the stomach by the opening of the LES, it moves into the stomach, and you can kind of see the anatomy of the stomach here. The stomach has folds in it, which helps with the mixing of the food, and it's a muscular organ. You can see the layers of muscle, so it can help kind of mix and move food so that it breaks down further. So as I just said, the stomach stores, mixes, and prepares food for digestion. It is a mechanical churning action, and then it mixes, which allows food to mix with the digestive juices, and the food can sit in there for several hours as hydrochloric acid works on the food. The enzyme pepsin, which helps to break down meats. Um, it helps in the absorption of minerals. There's other digestive enzymes like gastric lipase, something called intrinsic factor, which helps with B12 absorption, and then the hormone gastrin, which stimulates the gastric motility, which actually just means the stomach moving the food through and pushing the food through to the next phase into the small intestine. Um, The hydrochloric acid that's excreted increases the stomach's acidity to a pH of 2, and because it's so acidic, it helps kill any bad bacteria, and it also can help denature proteins. So proteins are typically like a three-dimensional structure, and it'll break those proteins into a more linear chain. Um, there's also something called pepsinogen, which turns into pepsin. And this helps continue that whole process of protein breakdown. And the stomach also has a good amount of mucus in it, and that protects the stomach lining from that hydrochloric acid. Um, I mentioned earlier gastric lipase. Um, that is secreted to target triglycerides or fat digestion. So there's multiple things happening in the stomach at the same time. So that bolus that we swallowed and that moved through our esophagus becomes what's called chyme. So that's a semi-liquid substance of like partially digested foods, some of those digestive juices I just mentioned. Um, so when that's moving through, if it's liquidy or high in carbohydrates, low in fiber, it'll move through the stomach pretty fast. But if it's like high fiber, high fat, high protein, it moves through slower. So that's where I was mentioning in last week's lecture about eating like a high protein, high fiber breakfast will keep you fuller longer. That's because it moves through your digestive system slower. So keep that in mind when you're making your food choices and you know there's going to be a length of time between meals. Sometimes eating a higher fiber, high protein meal will be better for you rather than eating something really high in sugars that'll move through your system faster. And then that pyloric sphincter is between your stomach and your small intestine, and that's what keeps food materials flowing slowly through your small intestine. So that sphincter allows about a teaspoon of chyme to enter the small intestine, and they say about every 30 seconds. But the main thing is that it's moving it through slowly so the small intestine has time to do its job. And then, of course, that also, all those sphincters prevent the backflow of contents back into the previous organ. So let's take another break. This will be the end of part 2, and we'll continue on to the small intestine in part 3.